Mouse of the South podcast on Rivals.com is back, episode 4 with Sam Spiegelman. I'm Chad Simmons, joined today by Gamecock Central football and recruiting analyst Wes Mitchell. Wes, you and I, we go way back. Been working together for, I don't know, maybe a decade or so, I would guess, something like that. But thanks for taking your time with us this week. Obviously, it was kind of a slow week, I guess, in the SEC in general last weekend with multiple games canceled, but one game that was not canceled was South Carolina and Ole Miss, and it seemed like that was the final straw for South Carolina, former head coach now, Will Muschamp. And let's just start with that. That's been the biggest news, definitely, I think, throughout college football. I think I went into 2020 thinking this might be the year because of 2020 that we might not see any firings because of the, no spring practice, the up and down on and off schedule this year due to the pandemic. And here we are now with a $15 million buyout. Will Muschamp is out at South Carolina. Let's go to you with that, I guess, first of all, starting with, were you surprised at the timing at the firing, or did you see this coming over the weekend?
Yeah, and thanks for having me on here. I think it was kind of interesting to follow it because before the season started, we had been told, Will Muschamp is safe. This is a situation where everybody understands. It's just a different year. It's 2020. The buyout, pandemic, all this stuff. Sort of no matter what happens, Muschamp is going to be back for 2021. And then I would say after the Texas A&M loss, that's when all the rumors started hitting message boards, hitting Twitter. I mean, y'all know how it is. And we started checking on those things, and the rumors at the time, this was after A&M, which was the week before Ole Miss, it was, Muschamp's going to be fired on Monday. So we started sort of checking in on that specifically, and it was, no, that's, it's not true. He's not going to be fired on Monday. It's not happening. But it was like, as the week went on after that Texas A&M game, the more we sort of heard, okay, he's not being fired right now, but this rumor sort of started with some truth somewhere. And sort of as the week went on leading into that Ole Miss game this past Saturday, we even sort of reported as much as we could on Friday that if the weekend went badly for South Carolina, that it could happen, and it could happen on Sunday. So obviously South Carolina lost to Ole Miss on Saturday. Defense did not play well again, third straight loss. They've been outscored. I don't even know the numbers, but it's by a ton the last 3 games. And I think it wasn't so much just the administration, but you have boosters, you have the fan base just pushing back so hard that it was time for a change, that South Carolina went ahead and did it obviously on Sunday. So I would say, to answer your question, it was not a surprise sort of leading into the decision. But if you would have asked me maybe a month ago, me would have said, yes, this was a surprise.
Yeah, Wes, obviously, are there any obvious candidates that come to mind? And in your opinion, based on what you know, what should we expect from the interim coach? Will he be one of the candidates? And how quickly do you expect this to kind of move forward and make a new hire?
Yeah, so Mike Bobo, obviously somebody that's got experience as a head coach, and I think he was sort of the obvious choice for them to tab him with that interim tag. I tend to think they're going to look a different direction as far as the actual head coaching job. Now, I think there's a real chance, depending on who the new head coach is, that Bobo could be retained, probably in an offensive coordinator position, maybe as like an assistant head coach type role, something like that. So that's something I'm sort of going to be looking for. I would say, as far as names, it's that point where there's all types of names out there. The list is very long. Some guys I'm sure higher than others within the the administration right now. It seems to me like the 2 names that have come up the most have been Shane Beamer, who is a little bit of an outside the box thought, but there's also the thought process that he's ready. He's ready for his first shot to be a head coach. And then Billy Napier there at Lafayette is a guy that is sort of one of those big, you see it every year. There's like a big name, up and coming young coach who's waiting for his first Power 5 spot. So those are the 2 names I've probably heard the most. If you go sort of outside, there's the Hugh Freeze talk that everybody sort of has thrown around, national media. Locally, I don't necessarily get the impression that that name is as strong as those other two. Another sort of, I don't even know if you would call him a dark horse, but somebody to keep an eye on would be right here in state with Coastal Carolina and Jamie Chadwell. I mean, they're undefeated. Obviously, there'd be some questions there about bumping up, from that level to Power 5 to the SEC. But he's someone, particularly depending on how it goes with those first names, that I could see rising in this search as it goes along.
Yeah, I kind of hope it's more Billy Napier so I can kind of claim the hashtag Billy Ball. So you already have Beamer Balls already out there. So Shane's kind of already in the past with his dad, Frank. But no, those are two opposite, I think, different types of guys. Billy being kind of that young, he was known at Clemson. He's from Ringgold, Georgia. Shane having those ties with his dad to Virginia Tech, South Carolina. He was at Georgia for a minute with Kirby and now over at Oklahoma. So both those guys have pretty strong, and somewhat known track records as far as recruiting in the South and ties to the area. And I think it comes down to also just kind of the staff they put around them. I think so key when it comes to South Carolina, and whether it comes to going after new targets in 2021 or 2022 or trying to retain the guys they want that are already committed in 2021. That kind of leads me to my next question, Wes, is where do you see this class going, I guess? And I guess we can start with maybe the timing of the new hire. I mean, are they, I guess they got to be somewhat urgent to try to get a new coach in place because of the early signing period. And there's some guys that are committed to Carolina right now, like a Jaydon Johnson, who's an early enrollee as well. So I guess it's kind of a two-part question. The timing, maybe you're kind of getting the vibe from the administration on when they want to hire someone, and then where do they go with this recruiting class moving forward?
Yeah, I think, when you asked me early on about were we surprised about the timing, I think the timing of doing, the firing now versus at the end of the year was very much because of the fact that the early signing period now exists. And I think they looked at this as, hey, the early signing period is a month away. So if you're going to actually go through the process of getting rid of a coach, handling all this sort of logistical stuff there, and then actually hiring a new coach, it was sort of like, we got to start now, I think was the thought process from what we've been told. So it's kind of one of those things, if it takes longer, to get the right guy, what you deem the right guy, then, it just takes longer. But in an ideal situation, ideal world, I think you look at a timeline where they're wanting, as soon as the actual season is over for everybody, to be able to already be in position to move very quickly, get a coach hired, and at least have have the guy be able to meet the recruits. Obviously, in today's world, they're going to be sitting just like we are right now, which I think is a factor as well. You have a new coach and recruits, and you can't even meet them in person. So at any point during, I don't know when we're going to be able to meet kids in person again if you're a coaching staff. So that's a factor. But just getting somebody in, letting them sort of be able to actually interact and talk with the recruits, who I think at this point are probably used to all this and realize they're not going to be able to take any more visits, obviously. So, yeah, so I think as far as from that point forward, though, we've already sort of warned our subscribers, hey, South Carolina is going to probably lose some guys in this class. They're probably going to lose some guys on the current team. We've seen opt-outs. There will be transfers in the offseason. We've sort of been like, hey, as a fan base, you have to accept the fact if you make a change, there's going to be turnover in probably every other aspect of your program. So I don't know if we know quite yet which specific guys are going to decommit. They're sort of working through it in their own way, I think. But certainly, generally speaking, we've sort of warned our subscribers, hey, just prepare yourself. There will be transfers, there will be decommitments, and then it will be up to the new staff to sort of reevaluate where this class is when they inherit it and decide how they need to finish it off.
So Wes, let me ask you this: you're Shane Beamer or you're Billy Napier, and you're stepping in. You're limited in what you can do to recruit through December 16th. You looking at this 2021 class, and you have guys that have probably never even stepped foot on South Carolina's campus before, and you got to go hop on a Zoom call and keep them in this class. In your opinion, who are the 2 or 3 or 4, must-saves for South Carolina in this 2021 class, or who is the absolute number one target that's uncommitted for Napier or Beamer, whoever's chosen as the head coach as soon as they take this job?
Yeah, I'll answer the second question first. I would say whatever the best wide receiver is that you can sign, the best wide receiver available, whoever that is, I would call him on the very first day and say, you're starting next year if you come to South Carolina.
Are you taking interviews for the job?
I mean, I hate to say it like that, but you got to say, look, there is an opportunity to play here, my man. You come in, be the face of the class, and come catch 75 balls next year as a true freshman. I think as far as particular guys, I look at this class. I look at Bryce Still. Kid, he's originally from North Carolina. He played ball in Virginia, but I think they need a linebacker or two who can come in and maybe play early, and Bryce sort of, I think, fits that mold. Nick Barrett is a defensive tackle that really has not gotten a ton of, I would say, pub, but they love him. They're very high on him as far as the current staff goes. And then, any of the wide receivers. You look at Rodarius Thomas there in Alabama. Sam Reynolds, Omega Blake. I think he could play maybe receiver or DB, but any of the playmakers. And then I tell you, a guy that I know Chad I think likes Juju McDowell there in Georgia. Just someone that they've been very high on for some time as somebody who I don't think is just a running back, can sort of help you in kickoff return, maybe even help you in the slot, do some different things for you. Just their lack of playmakers overall. Anybody that could possibly come in and make a few plays for them, I think is important right now. But if I was filling out this class after the fact, it would definitely be receiver, maybe another linebacker, and then maybe another DB or two, because I think you look at how involved Muschamp is with defensive backs as far as personally recruiting a lot of those guys. That's a spot where I think as this class plays out, you're probably going to lose some DBs. So that's, if you want to just sort of fast forward, the new coach is probably going to be looking at that position saying, I got to fill some holes here at some point between now and February.
Sure. Yeah, we'll finish with this and get you out of here, Wes. Thanks for your time again, man. But I'll look ahead to 2022 as far as if I'm Billy Napier or I'm the guy that gets the head coaching job, if I'm Shane Beamer, whoever I am, my first call is going to 2022 quarterback Gunnar Stockton. I'm going to get on that Zoom call. I'm going to diagram my offensive scheme to him to say why you have to come here and stay committed to South Carolina, because he can be that face of the franchise type of kid. I think, Wes, you know that, I know that, and we feel very strongly in agreement that he is a program changer type of kid. Now, football is not a one-man sport, and it's not a one man that makes a class, but he is a guy that would be, I think, a monumental signee for a program like South Carolina, especially at the quarterback position. So for me, if I was the coach, I'd almost say, look, I'll sign about half a 2021 class. I'll go to the transfer portal. I'll try to get me 2-3 wide receivers, a couple of maybe 1 or 2 year DBs to fill that gap, maybe a linebacker or two to fill that gap in the transfer. To me, that's kind of, as a head coach coming into a new job, that'd be kind of almost my approach, was maybe try to sign half a 21 class, but then get the other 10 to 12 in transfers, guys that are more prepared physically, even mentally, to play, SEC football for me. And then go hard after that 22 class, starting with a guy like Gunnar Stockton. So with that, Wes, how important is that? How much are the Gamecock Central subscribers talking even about 2022 guys like Gunnar compared to the Jujus or Derwin Burgess or Jaydon Johnsons, guys like that?
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, Chad. That would be maybe the most modern approach, to sort of rebuilding. You maybe aren't in a situation where you're going to land a bunch of really difference maker type prospects late in this class. So go out and see what you can find. And here's the thing: when you have a new coach come in, there may be some guys in the transfer portal that they're connected to from previous, maybe their previous job or just recruit them at previous places. So I think that would definitely be something to look out for. But yeah, certainly Gunnar Stockton is talked about on our message boards probably more than any 2021 prospect, to be honest. And it's kind of one of those things whenever we do a live show on YouTube and you can see the little chat going. And anytime we talk about recruiting or, especially if we talk about Bobo and the chance that Bobo is retained, what's going to happen with Connor Shaw, who's on staff as an off-the-field guy, but right now is on the field with the extra spot available. Every time you look at that chat, it's like Gunnar Stockton. Hey, are we going to keep Stockton? Are we going to keep Stockton? So obviously when this current staff landed a commitment from him, the plan was sort of, hey, that's the guy to build this 2022 class around. Like, just recruit to the fact that you have a difference-making quarterback. And, obviously sort of the on-the-field stuff with this current staff kind of got in the way of that, I think. But moving forward, I think when you have a new coach, it's almost like regardless of who it is, you have a little bit of a honeymoon period, I feel like. There's a little spike in recruiting. You're selling hope because nobody's seen you lose yet. So, I think you do get a little bit of boost in recruiting. So if I'm Beamer or Napier or whoever ends up with it, certainly, I do think you press ahead. It's actually a pretty good class in state for South Carolina in 22 as well compared to the last few years. Now Carolina's behind on several of those guys, but maybe you get a little boost from just being the new guy in town, a little extra juice from your fan base, a little extra excitement, and try to sort of say, hey, the fixture of this class, the guy that's going to be, lining up behind center is already here. Y'all come play around him, I think.
Yeah, and I'll say this. If whoever the new head coach is, if they retain Bobo, if they retain Connor Shaw in some fashion, Gunnar Stockton's going to South Carolina. It's just that simple. Now, if Bobo's out, Shaw doesn't get retained in some fashion, then I think Stockton goes on to, Georgia, North Carolina, some other program. And, little do the Gamecock Central subscribers know, but I have multiple interviews hidden with Gunnar Stockton. I'm just going to drop one sentence a day on the message board to kind of get more views for myself and more clicks. No, I'm just kidding. Gunnar does not talk, obviously, as Wes knows. Gunner's not going to do a lot of interviews. I think he'll kind of sit tight and stay quiet until something happens with the new coach and then the staff is shaped and all that. But Wes, Sam and I thank you again for your time. Obviously, you guys with Chris Clark and that staff at Gamecock Central run a great website for all South Carolina fans. Anything you want to leave, I guess, anybody that's not subscribers yet, I guess, with info about your website?
Yeah, come check us out if you're a South Carolina fan. We're going to have hopefully we've had daily updates on the coaching search so far. We're going to try to keep that up as long as we can. Certainly, we'll have it completely covered throughout. Hot boards, coaching candidate breakdowns, day-by-day updates. And right now, if they use the code SEARCH25, they'll actually get their first year for just $25. So we're going super aggressive. We want everybody to be able to get on and enjoy what we have, and then hopefully they'll stick around for the remainder.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is that 25 means there's actually 25 candidates for the head coaching spot, or what's that 25 mean? But Wes, definitely, man, always a pleasure, fun to talk. I know we'll be on the phone a lot the next few days with whether it be the coaching rumors or possible decommits and things like that from South Carolina. So thanks again for your time. Enjoy your holidays, man.
Yeah, thanks, y'all. How's it going? Okay.
Sam, obviously we'll continue on, man. That's obviously the big story in college football right now is the first firing of 2020. What's going to happen there and who's going to be the next head coach at South Carolina. But let's just stay on the quarterback, theme for a second in 2022. And I know we somewhat kind of have a schedule of our own and kind of think about how we're going to go on our podcast. But let's just, talking about Gunnar Stockton, he's obviously a premier quarterback in the 2022 class. You have a guy that's, right there among the best, if not the best overall players in the 2022 class in Quinn Ewers. Your plan, I think, right now is maybe see him play potentially on Thanksgiving Day if things go well with the pandemic and the games stay on schedule and things like that. We know Quinn's been in the news because of the decommitment from Texas. There's been a lot of buzz about Ohio State around his name, but I want to get your thoughts starting off first, Sam, with Quinn as the decommitment. Was that something that caught you off guard? I know very few things out there catch you off guard because you stay on top of your region. Now, it's impossible for us to know everything all the time. Nobody can do that in this industry. But did you see that coming? Was there a build-up to that decommitment, or did that catch you off guard?
Yeah, and just to kind of finish up where we were last time, I mean, you talked about what you would do if you were the interim South Carolina coach. I'm with you, Chad. You go get the JUCO and transfers, and you build a roster, and you put your first full recruiting class in 2022 around someone like Gunner, who, as a quarterback, especially now with all the virtual visits, can do the recruiting for you as an extended member of your coaching staff. And I think that's basically what we saw with Quinn committing to Texas in August. And at the same time, you had Jalen Gilbo and Faison Wilson, who are two other 4-stars in the Texas state rankings, obviously, hop on board. And all of a sudden there was buzz about Caleb Burton, who is the number 1 receiver in the state. There was buzz about Evan Stewart, who is just this athletic receiver from Frisco, who I'm hoping to catch next week as well around Thanksgiving. The decommitment did not surprise me because, Quinn had flirted with Ohio State, and he had flirted with Alabama, and he had flirted with Oklahoma before starting to kind of circle toward Texas. And Texas, for most kids in the state, Quinn grew up watching Texas and wanted to be, the starting quarterback of a championship contender, a playoff contender. And Texas had the look of that. And every summer they kind of start hitting the recruiting trail and start picking up major guys. I think about last year with Prince Dorba and Vernon Broughton, and ending the year with Alfred Collins. A lot of those guys making instant impacts right now. And then this year, it was the Quinn Ewers and Faison Wilson and Jalen Gilbo. And before that, it was Jalen Milroe and Hayden Connor. There's so many different, momentum swings. But Quinn wiped out the 2021 class momentum. So there's a lot to be excited about with a top 100 quarterback in Jalen Milroe. But then you don't want to overlook him and start putting all the pressure on this junior quarterback before his junior year. And that led to Milroe flipping to Alabama. That was a school that he had his eyes on originally. And adding Quinn to the fold just kind of moved Texas away from really a stellar 2021 class to a really good one. Obviously, they've fallen off with guys like Billy Bowman decommitting and going to Oklahoma, so on and so forth. But Quinn obviously was a little underwhelmed with the way that the season was going for Texas, from what I understand. There's all these rumors and stuff going around Coach Herman and his staff, but the truth is that Texas has not really come through in these big games. The future just remains kind of uncertain. They look like they play the part of a Big 12 contender one week, and then the next week they're underwhelming. They kind of don't show up to the games. And I think Quinn, he plays for South Lake Carroll, which is one of the top teams in 6A. You can bet on them making a run in the state playoffs each and every year under Coach Dodge. And obviously Quinn just wants to win. And, he's working to do that at the high school ranks, and he would prefer to do that at the college ranks. That's why he's talking about building a super team at Texas, and then wherever he goes next, maybe bringing some other elite players with him. I think that the future of Texas became too much of an uncertainty, and maybe he just realized he committed possibly too early. Him and his family are very calculated with everything they do, so they waited until they were sure of their decision. There's a ton of Ohio State buzz for obvious reason. I think it's kind of quelled a little bit. When I caught up with Quinn a little bit after the decommitment, he was just open and honest and said, listen, I just decommitted. I'm going to look back at all my options, and I'm just going to take my time with the process. I understand why others might think that he could be on a rush to Ohio State. At first, it seemed like it might be a flip. Then it seemed like he was maybe going to make a decision quickly. But what's the rush? He's not even done with his junior year. He can't visit any campuses until the spring, at least, we think. He's never been to Ohio State. So in my opinion, I'm taking Quinn for his words. I think he's going to evaluate each of his options. If by Thanksgiving he's ready to make up his mind, he thinks that Ohio State is the right fit with the stellar 2022 class that's being assembled, and a guy like Caleb Burton or Damani Jackson maybe going with him to Columbus, that might be enough for him to say, well, I know I can lead, and Ryan Day is a fantastic play caller. But I understand he's going to take his time a little bit, and I'm anxious to see what he does. And Chad, you won't be surprised. COVID has already pushed my game to next Friday morning. So we're getting I know I'm going to drive home Saturday night next weekend. We just need to see Quinn before we head back home.
Well, if something happens and the game gets moved again, you maybe run by his house and you can see him playing like Thanksgiving Day Nerf football in the street or something like that in the backyard.
I could be on the receiving end. We just set the camcorder up somewhere.
On air, again, for him, we can reevaluate. You can see him as a receiver. Put a little headset on. We can watch the ball coming into Sam Spiegelman's hands, and you can run some routes out there. Go to the mailbox, turn right, and then run down to the light pole and catch a deep ball.
It's just all about if you can separate from his little brothers in coverage. That's all I want to see is how do you work.
We have to evaluate you a little bit as a receiver.
Well, that's what I'm saying is that maybe I could be on the back end of the 250 if we're going to be a new eval.
You get my vote. I'll call Freeman tonight.
That's all I need. If I can get you, I can get Woody behind me. I'll be okay. We'll get Mike to jump along later.
Let's talk about, Quinn as a player a little bit. Obviously, we were just talking about Gunnar Stockton. He's a guy I'm very familiar with here in Georgia. He's the top 2022 quarterback in my area right now, followed by a guy like Ty Simpson in Tennessee. Both those guys are top 50 guys in the country. Quinn, right now is a top 10 guy, maybe a number one guy at some point. What do you think makes him special and to even be in that discussion for the number one player in the country?
Yeah, I think, I've been very fortunate to see Quinn live in games a ton over the last 2 years. They just have such a kind of like when you talk about Cedar Grove, when I'm in Dallas, I'm flocking toward Carroll because they've had a loaded roster the last couple of years. And Quinn's a big reason why. I remember seeing him the first time at practice, just airmail something about 70 yards on a dime. And he wasn't even the starter back then. He was competing for the starting job. Seeing him in person, I think you really get a chance to appreciate his ability to kind of evade the pass rush, step up in the pocket, step into all of his throws very confidently. He's got an outrageous arm. It might be the strongest arm that I've actually witnessed in person. But obviously, arm strength is one thing. It's accuracy and your chemistry with your receivers is a whole different area. And it's one that I personally prioritize over arm strength. And Quinn's chemistry with his receivers, and he's got a bunch of different type of receivers. He's got a basketball team with Brady Boyd, who's your 4.4 speedster downfield, and RJ Maryland, who's a new 4-star tight end for us. His dad was a first-round pick out of Miami, playing D tackle, and RJ is that big physical tight end, a flex tight end, and he works the field with his running backs. And he also, even though he's a pro style, he can move. He can move really well. He's an athletic baseball player as well. I think just his ability to kind of go against these elite defensive fronts with 3 and 4 Power 5 defensive linemen. He takes hits. He stands in the pocket. He delivers throws accurately. He makes really difficult throws where he knows he needs timing. He knows he needs to kind of buy time in the pocket or extend the play, and he's consistently delivering. Sometimes I kind of joke with him. He's sometimes boring to watch. He can make these really exciting throws, and he throws off his back foot and he can launch it 50 yards into Brady's arms as he's just getting a yard or two away from a DB. But he's largely boring because he surgically rips apart these defenses and he hands the ball off, and he's just going to win games. He just wants to win. He doesn't care about a gaudy stats or being the player of the game, but he can be anytime he wants to be. He can step up and take over a game. I'm really excited to, see what he does on Thanksgiving or in the playoffs. And I'm very fortunate we'll have a whole other year of Quinn to see, what big game he finds himself in. I think about the DeSoto game last year and the Duncanville game last year. And, I saw him against DeSoto again to open the season this year, which obviously is one of the best teams in all of Texas. And he can take over at any point. He's just super fun to watch. He's super calm and cool. And, I think he's got all of the physical gifts that if he goes to Ohio State or Alabama or Clemson or Auburn or A&M, he's going to be lights out. He is just a special arm talent, and he's a great kid, which you could really get behind.
Yeah, he sounds a lot like, for me, when I come, not to put, the pressure, even comparison, as Trevor Lawrence, just from the mental side, just doesn't care about the accolades, doesn't care about throwing for 500 yards, doesn't at least Trevor didn't like self-promote every play he made, because every play he did make was like a highlight reel, but he made it look so normal and so effortlessly. I mean, just the way he threw the ball and some of the plays I saw Trevor making, just the humility that he has and how he handled the success and the notoriety and I'll never forget how he committed so under the radar and quietly just didn't care. Now it's a different time, a few years later in social media and all that, all the outside noise, but I still believe today that if Trevor was in the 2021, 22, he'd commit the same way. He doesn't care about all the fanfare, or he didn't. And sounds a lot, similarities there, just from the person side, even maybe the player too, but just how he's handling things as far as Quinn. Let me put you on the spot real quick, Sam. So would you say, just yes or no, Ohio State is the favorite?
My future cast is on Ohio State. As I said, my last conversation with Quinn, he told me he wanted to take his time and evaluate all of his options. He was not rushing a second decision. As you know, kids largely commit twice if they end up decommitting or flipping. So his next decision will very likely be his final decision before he goes to college. My pick is on Ohio State, but I would not be surprised if next week on the podcast or in 2 weeks on the podcast, after I see him, I start saying, Alabama is starting to get involved or Clemson is starting to get involved. He's just that good of a player. And I think that Trevor Lawrence is the fairest comp. I think the one thing that's missing, and Quinn has a right to be the number one player in the country from what he can do physically and off the field. His leadership skills speak for themselves. I am super excited because I know Trevor Lawrence has a lot of trophies in his case. I would love to see Quinn just kind of overcome that big game hump. Kind of reminds me of Peyton Manning in his career, where you have this, world-renowned talent. You just kind of want to see him get over the hump and maybe win a championship or, come from behind, win in the playoffs or something really big for South Lake Carroll. And I think it's in the cards. I'm just hoping to time it up with one of these visits during COVID that I can see it.
Yeah. So it's the interesting thing is he was a one-time commit to Texas, and the buzz has been around Ohio State since he decommitted. There's also been buzz about former Ohio State coach Urban Meyer. If something happened in Austin, Tom Herman is axed and fired. Urban could be that guy. What if that was to happen? In the hypothetical world, Tom's out, Urban's in. Does that change things for Quinn, and maybe he goes back to Texas because of Urban Meyer, the offense he runs, what he did at Ohio State?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's 100% hypothetical, but he's one of the, I think he's been rumored to either Texas or USC. Those are two national jobs where he would only have to recruit his home state, and he could put together a pretty stellar 25-man class year in and year out. And if Urban Meyer took over Texas and Quinn was not committed at this point, I think he would 100% consider the Longhorns. As I said earlier, he's a kid from Dallas that grew up rooting for Texas. And while he's considered out-of-state schools like Oklahoma and Alabama and Ohio State at the moment, I think obviously the fan in him drew him to Texas for his first commitment. And you'd have to listen to someone with such a impressive resume as Urban Meyer. And I know that he has interest in the Texas job. I can 100% say that with confidence. Will he take it? I don't know. But I do know that Quinn will listen. You just have to think it's a natural for his family to at least listen to a national championship winning coach who's now at the helm of the school that you wanted to play at. It would be interesting, though, Chad, to see Ryan Day and Urban Meyer get into a recruiting battle for the first time.
It would. It's weird in this age where it's almost like, we have different connections and sources on all the different levels, and you hear about, Urban Meyer maybe to Texas, and the weird thing in all this is right now, it's almost like Tom Herman will likely, I would say right now, keep his job unless maybe behind closed doors, Urban agrees that he will take the job to kind of force Herman out, where it's not like, hey, we're going to fire a coach, then kind of put a search together, figure out who you want to get. It's like they have one or two guys now, schools like that in mind. And if we can work it out kind of behind the scenes, that he's going to take the job, well, to go ahead and fire our guy and bring the new guy in. You know, it's kind of a weird, just different how things happen now compared to 5, 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah, it reminds me of Les Miles and Jimbo Fisher with, Jimbo was the guy that the AD wanted, and they would have their private meetings. But unless Jimbo said yes, then Les was going to stay at LSU.
And it's got to be a weird thing as a head coach to know that's probably going on, but yet you're still the coach right now of that program.
And I had a conversation with a prominent 2022 recruit who I have a future cast in for Texas. I put it in probably in January or March or April.
We go find who that is real fast.
Yeah, why don't you check that out and give Rivals.com a click. And he was, he has lost a couple of games, not by much though. And they are winning a bunch of games right now. He's not having a Notre Dame, Alabama-esque season, but he's not having a season as disappointing as Georgia or LSU. He's not having the success of A&M. Maybe that's putting pressure on him because Herman and Fisher were hired around the same time, and A&M is taking off, whereas Texas is probably, I think they're in the top 25 or at least receiving votes. They're still a solid team week in and week out. He's winning games, and if he closes out the season with a 5 or 6 or 7 game winning streak, are they really going to replace him? It probably is, only if Urban Meyer or someone of that nature would take the job.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anybody else like that of that nature per se to really take that job. To me, Urban's that guy, man, that he steps right in. He changes that class like that, the perception of Texas just like that. And like you said, I mean, Herman's not doing a terrible job by any means. I mean, maybe they're more like treading water right now instead of like streaming, or just following the stream down and just killing it and all that. But let's move on from them, and just obviously we've talked about Texas with Tom Herman, Quinn Ewers, Ohio State, South Carolina with Wes Mitchell. Let's hit on, obviously we're known kind of as the road warriors, and staying on the road, and you, I'd say more than me right now, just the way the games go for you in your area. I don't have those Saturday afternoon games and stuff like that where I'm at in the South. Now, I've had games on crazy days this year with 2020 with the COVID and all that stuff, but I only saw one game last week. So I actually drove to see a second game. Last Thursday, I drove, 5.5 or so hours to Tallahassee to see Terrion Arnold and John Paul Catholic, and he's one of the top 2021 uncommitted prospects in the country. A kid I like. I saw him practice about a month ago. I want to see him in the playoffs, see him play a game, and I'm excited to go see him. I get there about 2.5 hours prior to kickoff, and the coach hits me up saying, "Hey, Chad, just so you know, our game has been canceled. The opposing team had a spike in COVID, ended up forfeiting the first round of the playoffs. So Arnold and those guys got a 2-0 win. And I saw nothing but my hotel room walls that night working on ranking stuff for 2021 and stuff like that. So anyway, that was my miss last Thursday. But then on Friday, I did get a chance to get back up to Georgia. Saw numerous 2022 guys, a couple 2023 guys. But I'll touch on a couple of high-profile kids, and leading the way is Mykel Williams from Hardaway High School in Columbus, Georgia, a defensive end who I think – will be in that discussion for a 5th star. Really kind of already has. I mean, he's definitely up there, a top 50 guy in 2022. I compare him to a guy like Trayvon Walker, who now plays for Georgia, signed a couple of years ago, was a top 30 guy in the country for us on Rivals.com, just missed the 5th star. He's, I think, very comparable, a very athletic defensive lineman, maybe Williams' best play in front of me, even though he had 10-plus tackles and 2 or 3 sacks in the game, might have been a crazy jump ball play at tight end for a 25-yard gain on the offensive side of the ball. Just flashing his offensive skill set, just the athleticism there on him catching the ball, being a 6'5", 250-pound defensive lineman, going up against 2 DBs, snatching the ball, kind of underthrown. But he had multiple highlights in this game, and he had a couple tackles for loss. Like I said, I want to say he got 3 sacks, but at least 2 that he was definitely the main guy back there. But he was always wrecking havoc in the backfield, quickness off the ball, the way he can change direction and redirect as a defensive lineman, and just the versatility. He can play 5. He can play 3. He can stand up. I mean, he's a guy that can be moved around, and I think that's very valuable in today's, which I think more of an offensive skill game in college football. So I think he obviously was a top guy. And then the guy he went against a lot much of the night is 2022 offensive tackle Elijah Pritchett from Carver High School in Columbus, Georgia. A new eval for us. He will be a 4-star, just looking ahead in December for the new rankings. He's a guy that's so athletic at offensive tackle. I think he kind of surprised some people a year ago, got his first time starting on varsity as a sophomore, really progressed throughout the season. Obviously, it has not been the ideal offseason this year for him to kind of get the notoriety, get the camp work and things like that against top, defensive linemen. But you see his game still evolving physically, fundamentally. He's in that 6'5", 275. So he's a lean offensive tackle right now, super athletic guy, great flexibility, good bend. He can move with those quicker edge rush guys at defensive end. I think just when you look at him and you see what he does now and you kind of project what he'll be physically 3, 4, 5 years from now, at 6'5", 6'6", super long arms, probably at 310, 315 range physically, body-wise. He's going to end up somewhere probably in a top SEC, ACC program. He's got the Bama offer. He has the Georgia offer. He's pursued by Florida, Florida State, schools like that as well. You think about his potential and where his ceiling's at, that's what I think appeals the most to a guy like me or even a college coach, is about the potential. And then I'll close with a guy like J.Q. Hardaway. He has the same last name as his high school. He has no relationship to his high school, Hardaway High School. J.Q. Hardaway, a versatile guy. I think probably long-term a safety. He plays some corner now. He plays free safety. He's had a very good year at wide receiver as well for his high school team. But I think what think stands out most about him is just versatility and length. He's a 6'2" plus athlete that's likely going to end up in the secondary somewhere, and you want a guy now that's going to be 6'2", 6'3", super long arms. He's a very lean 175 or so right now. He'll probably play around 195 in college somewhere. You can bring him in the box. He can roam the secondary. Just picked up a new offer from University of Georgia. Has offers from schools like Tennessee, South Carolina. I think as his junior tape gets out, more teams will offer him because of the size and the versatility. I think that's what stood out to me as well in this game. Just the range he has on the back end of the secondary, how he can catch balls at receiver. He will lay the wood and play physical. So I think those 3 guys highlighted by Mykel Williams, Elijah Pritchett, and then J.Q. Hardaway were my 3 big names I saw last weekend on the road. What about you, Sam?
Well, Chad, I'm taking one of those 1-game slates this weekend too, just to kind of gear up for that big Thanksgiving trip. So, but I did 3 days in Houston. Probably I might head back to Houston one more time for the playoffs at the end of the regular season. But I had to see the big showdown between Katie and Katie Taylor. Your guys, Bryce and Hayden Connor, 2 of the top linemen in the country. Bryce is a 5-star, the number 1 guard. He manned the center position, which he did warn me about in advance. And I got to be honest, on the sidelines, I heard a couple times people saying Bryce is bloody again. And I think Bryce was playing through a couple of injuries. He was fantastic, even at center, where he's, it's obviously a critical position for high school, but you are limiting Bryce and his ability to, pulverize people out in space when you move him to the middle. But he was rock solid, and Hayden was rock solid as well. And he had the challenge of going against a top 100 in 2022 and Malik Sia at Katy. And Malik, this is my first time seeing Malik live, and he is explosive off the ball. I was a little underwhelmed because of, the lack of sack production, but he was constantly putting pressure on Katie Taylor's quarterback. He had a big tackle for loss, and when he's on, you see why people like Clemson and LSU and Texas A&M want him so badly and covet him. On the back end of the Katy secondary, you had Florida State commit Hunter Washington. He was able to make a couple of good tackles, just fly to the ball, and then cover downfield well. And on the other side of him, you have a Rivals 250 junior, Bobby Taylor, and he got beat a couple of times in the first half. He told me he came out very motivated in the second half. He almost pulverized a dude right in front of me on the sidelines, and then he picked off a pass in the fourth quarter on a jump ball downfield. And then 2023, another nickel safety that Katie uses, Arian Parish. USC recently offered. I was really impressed. He has a lot of the same skills that has Hunter Washington, going to Florida State and in the top 250. So I think Arian is going to basically replace Hunter on the outside. Last year, you see the development of that Katie secondary. I was able to check out Cody Jackson, an OU commit, for the second time on Friday night. Cody is kind of that boomer bust receiver. He'll have either 3 catches for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. This time he had about 7 catches for about 60 yards. He dropped a touchdown. He also got beat for a touchdown playing DB. It wasn't Cody's best night, but I did appreciate seeing some volume in his game. He actually didn't look too terrible if he were to try playing DB at Oklahoma. He really, his boomer bust, he was more bust, to be perfectly honest, but we know what Cody is capable of as that speedy, 6'1", 180-pound receiver. But I was really impressed with that Richmond Foster Manville game with Deuce Fothery. He's going to A&M to play tackle. He's 6'8", 300 pounds. He's an all-world basketball player. And his game has just evolved so much in a year, Chad, that he's locking down 2 guys in pass protection. He's pulling from the left tackle spot and blocking dudes out in space in the run game. He's getting to multiple layers of the defense, blocking against the run. He's gonna be a big riser in the 2020 rankings. I think he might be the best lineman that A&M is getting this year. I've been really impressed with his development. And the last guy I'll leave you with is Jaydon Blue from Klein Kane. Jaydon is, a 4'5" speed kid, 6 foot, 200 pounds, kind of a typical back. He's a guy that's always liked OU, Texas, and LSU. Georgia is a team that Del McGee is starting to really push since coaches have started to recruit juniors. Jaydon went against probably one of the best well-coached teams in Houston and Klein Oak. Their coach used to play for A&M, so they're very well coached, and they were keyed in on the running game. And Jaydon just continued to, 3-4 yards until he broke a couple loose. He finished with 2 touchdowns. He's averaging 9 yards a carry. He's got 16 touchdowns and about 1,200 yards through about 7 games. He's having a really solid – he's a top 100 kid for us in 2022. But it was a really solid weekend in Houston. I only got one game on my radar, and it's to see our number 1 2022 prospect in Louisiana. That's Jacoby Matthews. I'm going to go check him out playing quarterback because he had a phenomenal game last week for Ponchatoula, and they have a big rivalry game this weekend against Hammond. Where are you going, Chad?
That might be a potential 5-star. I mean, Jacoby's definitely a guy that we've talked about. I mean, I actually saw him at the little 7-on-7 in NOLA right before things shut down back in early March. And I saw Cody Jackson too. Actually, I was in Houston at the Rivals camp. I think you were off that weekend.
He was the wide receiver MVP.
He actually had a good day. I remember seeing just how quick he was out of his breaks. And obviously it's a little bit different with pads on, and it's a one-day sample size for me. But
it all depends on who's throwing you the football. I'll say that.
Yeah, no doubt. I can definitely understand that and test with that with receivers and stuff like that. For me, I still don't know as we record this really where I'm going to be yet this week. I mean, it's been kind of a weird year, obviously, but I've probably actually gotten to see a lot more games or teams than I would in a normal year because of all the Monday games, Tuesday games, and the different changes throughout the year with makeup games and COVID, issues there and all that. I mean, I think I've seen somewhere around like 40 games this year or something like that.
Wow.
So this week, though, there are some games on Thursday, but I've already seen the players that are in these games that are playing Thursday. So I'm kind of debating, do I go back and see a 2022 kid for a second time, 5 hours away, or do I just stay and catch up on things or even see my family for a minute on Thursday and then go to a game locally on Friday? So I still don't know yet where I'm going, but I will go to a game. I promise you that. And I will see somebody good that hopefully plays well. in front. I know next week, Sam, we have a special. It'll be Thanksgiving week, man. It's hard to believe that, we've gone from maybe a football season in question to now getting to playoff time for us in our states. And now here we are in Thanksgiving week, and we'll have a special episode where I think our plan is to kind of break down and give, each team fan base, a player, a commit to be thankful for and why they're big for that program in the future. Now, I don't know about what we'll say about South Carolina with the unknown about who's going to be coaching and where those guys stand. But we'll mention each school in our conference, Big 12 for you, SEC for me. But hopefully you'll give us a listen on Turkey Day next week on Thanksgiving. I know you and I love chicken too. We're going to hit on this one day, Sam. Chick-fil-A, Popeyes, Cane's. Which one?
That's why they call us the mouths of the South, Chad.
Yes, it's the way how we eat chicken. It's a very easy eat for me on the road.
For sure.
Not messy. Getting those chicken strips or even a chicken sandwich is much easier than trying to grab something else, which may be healthier for us, like a salad or some vegetables or something like that. That's the worst part about being on the road is what you have to eat.
Yeah, you're a road warrior. You got to keep that spirit high, and a salad doesn't really keep that spirit high for too long.
It doesn't. It runs dry pretty quick. That energy level and stuff like that you got to have for the grind. But thanks again. So I think we've made it, through 4 episodes, man, almost like a month of Mouth of the Souths, podcast on Rivals.com. Hopefully we can look back and this time next year and have a full year of podcasts,
That'd be pretty incredible.
Sam, always a pleasure, man. Definitely you and your wife and dogs and pets, and enjoy the holidays and Thanksgiving. And we'll talk again soon, my friend.
Same to you, Chad, and the whole fam.